In previous videos of mine, we explored two core ideas of early Buddhism. First, in the Kalama Sutta, that gave us a toolkit for knowing, for teaching us to verify truth through our own direct experience, not by authority nor reason alone. And I'll leave links to videos about that below in the notes if you haven't seen them. Second, we learned in a different video that in the early Buddhist sense, we are all, to an extent, fools. Fools until we become fully enlightened. And I'll leave a link to that video as well if you haven't seen it. In that video, we also learned that true wisdom begins with our understanding and admitting that we ourselves are basically fools. But when you combine these two powerful ideas, a subtle and dangerous trap emerges for the serious practitioner. If we use the Kalama's method to discover profound truths, how do we, as we might say fools, people who are not truly knowledgeable, hold to this knowledge without clinging to it egoistically? How do we approach this truth without turning it into dogma? How do we avoid becoming the intelligent fool who's more trapped than ever? Perhaps we know people like this in our own lives. Maybe we know somebody like this when we look in the mirror. The Buddha's answer to this conundrum is not about what we know, but about how we carry what we know. We know that the biggest danger is the fool who thinks that they are wise. Given this, the advice to us becomes clear. That is, we should find teachers and friends who demonstrate genuine humility and yet are willing to kindly help us to be a better person. This is the ideal in Buddhism of the spiritual friend, what's known as the Kalyana Mitta. It's pretty much a given that all of them, all of our spiritual friends, indeed all of us, including ourselves, are going to be fools in this early Buddhist sense. That is, people who are not very wise all the time, people who are making mistakes. But that does not mean that we shouldn't still choose wisely our fellow fools. We should put a priority on surrounding ourselves with those who are self-aware, who to an extent know their limits and their weaknesses, and of course also strive to be kind. The key here is to try to avoid the influence of dogmatism and conceit. Now, this first step of surrounding ourselves with the right people is extremely important. The Buddha began his famous poem on seeking good fortune, which I did my book about, if you haven't seen it. He begins this poem with this very point. That is to say, we should avoid fools. We should avoid the truly foolish. If we want to live a good life, and indeed hope for a better life in the future, the key starting place is to surround ourselves with the right kind of people. But in doing this, we still have not touched the deeper internal challenge. What do we do with our own minds? The Kalama Sutta tells us how to acquire skillful knowledge, which is, in a nutshell, through our own direct experience and the leadership of those around us who we deem to be wise. The next step in our epistemological journey, or journey of knowledge, is to learn what to do once we've gained this understanding. And for this, the Buddha gave us one of his most vital analogies, the simile of the raft. All sentient beings are confronted with the basic fact of dukkha, that life is stressful, that life is filled with suffering. And although there's always the potential in life for great joy and happiness, the great joy and happiness that arises is always going to be fleeting and uncertain. Our task, therefore, is to sort of find a way to cross over this, what the Buddha describes as a rising flood of suffering, and land on the farther shore, which is a place of safety, of wise understanding and contentment. So, the Buddha says, we build ourselves a makeshift raft with the materials that we find around us on the ground. This raft is the Dharma. It's the teaching and the practice. If we're successful at building this raft, then we try to navigate the rapids and land on the farther shore of enlightenment. However, the Buddha then asks us, once we've reached that farther shore, should we then act to sort of hoist this raft onto our heads and carry it around with us? Now, this raft we've talked about is indeed indispensable for our crossing. It's indispensable for the journey that we took. It's that knowledge that we verify for ourselves using the methods that the Buddha outlined to the Kalamas. But the value of this raft, of this knowledge, is purely instrumental. That is, it's a tool, not a treasure. The true treasure, the true goal, is the farther shore itself, that is, liberation, not the raft, which is simply knowledge of the Dharma. Clinging to these kinds of views of the Dharma, even of the Dharma, I should say, even things that are verified by our own direct experiences, is, for the Buddha, a fundamental mistake. It mistakes the tool for the goal. Here, the serious practitioner faces a dangerous trap. It's all too easy to fall into becoming what we might term an intelligent fool. That is, it's not that we simply cling to this raft, but instead we turn ourselves into raft connoisseurs. We've mastered the Kalama Sutta. We consider ourselves experts in epistemology. We can analyze suttas and win debates over fine points of the Dharma. Maybe we also embrace other forms of practice, other Buddhisms. Of course, there are many approaches to the Buddhist Dharma, so we perhaps try to understand all of them or many other ones. Perhaps we even try to understand other religious or philosophical approaches in order to bring a big knowledge of other ways the people have approached these same questions. We spend time building for ourselves logically perfect rafts, or maybe even just one especially well-constructed, logically perfect raft. But while we're doing this, we're remaining firmly on this near shore. What we're doing essentially is polishing up our collection, sure of our wisdom. And again, perhaps there are people you know like this. Perhaps when you look in the mirror, one of these kinds of people is staring back at you. I sometimes feel that way myself. But this is the intellectual process of using profound concepts like non-attachment or like emptiness to reinforce our own egoism rather than to dismantle it. In essence, this is a form of spiritual bypassing, substituting knowledge for wisdom. So the journey to wisdom has stages. First, we learn what a fool is. That is, somebody who acts unwisely and brings suffering on themselves and others. Second, we learn how a wise person learns to know things. This we gain from the Kalama Sutta and other places in the early suttas. The third and most crucial step is learning how to let go of clinging to what we know. The ultimate expression of wisdom is not in the quality of the raft that we construct, but essentially in our willingness to leave that raft on the shore once it has served its purpose for us. Ask yourself, which of my hard-won beliefs have served their true purpose already? Am I using this raft to cross the flood, to cross the river to the farther shore? Or am I simply sitting on this near shore, polishing up the collection that I have? This whole practice of letting go of views, of willingly leaving our precious raft behind us, is powered by one of the Buddha's most liberating and radical insights, the teaching of non-self. After all, if there's no permanent, unchanging self to own a view in the first place, then what is there to cling? To explore this profound question, I recommend my earlier video on the Buddha's second sermon, which was all about non-self. If you're getting something out of these videos of mine, consider taking a look at my Patreon page, which is linked up here on the screen and down below in the notes, and see if you want to help support the channel and the work that I'm doing here. I hope we'll see you on that video about non-self or one of the other videos in my channel, or next week's video. And meanwhile, all of you, please be well.